Mclain Fogg is a 90-year-old company, 1925, and I was kind of pleased to hear my CIO came back from a conference recently and said that Mclain Fogg is the 98th largest private enterprise in the United States. One interesting fact is that we hold over 100 patents, and they continue to grow. There's 3 divisions to Mclain Fogg. The first one is the component solutions, where we manufacture nuts and bolts and other components such as engineered plastics and linkage and suspension parts. The second part is Mclain Power Systems that serves the electric, utility, telecommunications, and civil markets. The third one is the investment partners that's responsible for acquiring new businesses and investing capital into existing businesses. So, you know, the word Industry 4.0, IoT, IIoT has been thrown around a lot lately. And my favorite example is of how IBM in the past couple months has decided to open up their IoT business unit and is going to invest billions and billions of dollars over the next several years. But the part that I like is how they've partnered with the Weather Channel to gather that weather data and drive business decisions through hundreds of thousands of sensors and millions of cell phone users. To bring meaning back to earth for us at Mclain Fogg, we kind of took a look at it a little bit differently. We took a look at our IT department that's involved in an ERP implementation across all 30 divisions. And through the work that we've been doing with the business, we've both have realized that IT is no longer just a support department, that we can add value through various opportunities. The second half of the business is the operational transformation department that's been established about 5 years ago, and we've hired a trainer from what used to be the Lean Alliance, and we now have a company-wide lean manufacturing training program for all employees. And through that empowerment of employees, the goal is to train the operators and to kind of empower them so they're not only doers anymore. They're doers and thinkers now because they're most intimate to the processes. And most importantly, this is executive backed. There's been several scenarios where some initiatives for collecting data or presenting information have just failed because of lack of this backing. So the joint effort of those 2 departments and the business understanding and the business allowing us to do this, because we need to grow. We're acquiring companies every single year, and it's not going to stop. So for us, the meaning is in innovation, waste elimination, and process stability. Some of the opportunities, if you look at the top picture there, we manufacture product in batches. And these are basically lug nuts coming off of a forming machine. You can see the red bucket is scrap, the green is good parts. And we move these containers, 15,000 pieces, across from operation to operation, and we weigh them in between each operation. So the opportunity presented itself that we need to eliminate some of this non-value added activities, such as weighing product, manual reporting of pieces, and the inspection and rework that goes into a lot of this product. The other part is the operational unknowns. As much as the management wants to know what that information is, what is the OEE numbers for this former, we don't have that information. We can't give it to them, but we know this is something they want. And all of these items, they add up to big dollars through excess inventory, quality problems, and really long customer lead times.
Okay, so as IT, what we looked at is we obviously we don't have an unending budget, so we looked at it as what can we do. So we kind of backed up a step and said, what do we have? Okay, well, we've got software, right? We're implementing ERP across all of our divisions. So that's one base, but we also have other software like Kepware, okay, that talks to our machines. Speaking of machines, we have hardware, okay? We've got all this equipment. We have formers, we have tappers, we have sorting stations. Some of it's got PLCs, some of it doesn't, some of it's serial, okay? If you sat in a panel session, we talked a little bit about standards, and I think, came to the conclusion there are none. Because every time you try and set a standard, someone brings in another piece of equipment that's doing something different. So we looked at that, and we also have our business needs, right? What does the business need? Okay, well, my CFO wants to look at totally different data than the supervisor on the floor running the formers. Okay, than the operator running the machine. Okay, but if we can bring all that stuff together, if we look at all three of the things, what we're really looking for is a visualization of accurate real-time data. Okay, and that can be anything. That can be scaled up, that can be scaled down to that operator looking at the machine to see how many pieces am I doing an hour versus my maintenance manager saying which machines are getting ready to break. Okay, so when looking at that, we said, how do we get ourselves into a situation where we can go forward with this? Okay, so we decided to look at our terminologies and look at how we talk about things. We looked at assets. Like I said, an asset can be anything from a PLC controlled piece of equipment to a piece of equipment in the quality office that's doing load tests on something that speaks serially back to a PC. If you need the data, you got to get it somehow. On my slide here, I put PLCs, but what does PLCs mean to us? Because we all talk about PLCs, but being a process logic controller, but not necessary in today's world, right? Today we have digital counters. We have machines with digital counters. That's all they have. There's nothing controlling. There's no logic controlling. It's just counting digitally. The picture of that PLC there, that's not actually a PLC. That's an Adreno that looks like a PLC. Okay, it's a new product out, and it actually works pretty well. We're going to be implementing that in the near future. So you got to look at outside the box, not just PLC control equipment. Next thing is you got to start talking about how do you bring this stuff together, okay? J.D. Edwards don't care about those tags back on that PLC, and that's where software like Kepware comes in. Okay, Kepware does an excellent job of being able to go out, reach out, and touch all this different equipment, not just PLC based, and bring it up and present it in a manner that we can use. Once we get it up there on the wire, then we need something to transform it, okay, and transform it more in a business aspect. So we chose BizTalk. Why did we choose BizTalk? Well, it's a Microsoft platform. We're a Microsoft shop, and we had it handy. Turns out there's some good reasons to use it too. So, and then we finally need to get that to our enterprise system. So if we can follow that logic, if we can do that and repeat it, we got it, right? Easy. We started at the first process. We said, let's do a proof of concept. And what we did is we looked at all of our equipment on the floor, and we said, what's really easy? Well, obviously, the one machine that's already wired, already has PLC, already counting parts. That's the easy one. Let's go for that. So what we did is, oops, I went the wrong way. We decided to take that as our R&D machine. We connected to it through Kepware and started counting parts, and that gave me the ability on the back end to work with BizTalk. Chris worked with BizTalk, and we actually started bringing stuff up through BizTalk and use that as a model to go forward to pump it to our enterprise system. Once we had that, we kind of had a model. Well, obviously that was the first step in the model, but that started giving us the model. But like I said, less than 50% of our equipment was wired. So we had to start looking at how are we going to do that? How are we going to quickly get some of this equipment working and not spend a fortune? Once again, like I said, things like Controlinos, in the serial counters, they actually do, Kepware will talk to that stuff. So that was very important to us. Serial drivers, we have all this legacy outdated stuff. How do we make that work? We talked in the other session about standards. We can't just go replace all that equipment. Obviously, that would be billions of dollars. So using a standard to say we're going to follow the standard, darn it, would cut out all that equipment. We wouldn't be able to talk. So you got to be flexible in that. And that's where that middleware comes in, that BizTalk, that Kepware. that comes in and helps you be more flexible with that old equipment that you're just not going to be able to replace.
So that's where we decided to use Kepler. You know, there's a bunch of these machines, each with its own PLC vendor. You know, whether it's and its own language, Modbus, Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, and Kepler is very good at getting this all up to a standard of the OPC UA standard. They really do make it as easy as 1, 2, 3. You set up a channel, select the driver, point the device node at the device through its IP address, and list it, and then you map out the registers in memory that you want to collect and map over to tags that you can actually read. What this does for us, it enables us to, in essence, bridge the industrial network to the business network. So you might want to ask, how do we get the data out? Well, the most obvious answer has been OPC UA clients. Some of the secondary ones are database. You can throw the data into a ODBC compliant database, or you can have Kepler forward the data up to Splunk for further analysis. And about 6 months ago, Scott and I started having this conversation of, what do we do about this? How do we bridge this OPC world to the distributed networks of today? And we reached out to Kepler. We started a conversation with Eric, and he told us, well, there's an agent for that. We got an agent for that. So the 2 IoT agents that Kepler has introduced are Mqtt, which is a publish-subscribe protocol. It is lightweight and portable. So there's normally a implementation of Mqtt in most standard programming languages, and it's easy to get at. Through some of this research, we also found out that the Facebook Messenger app uses Mqtt to send out and distribute its IMs to millions of its users because it is power efficient on the smartphones and low latency. The other one is HTTP, and Kepler exposes it in a resource-based fashion as a REST API. The important fact about this HTTP implementation is that we can now write back to the devices using just a simple web browser. So what's a topic in Mqtt? Topic is, you can think of it as kind of a URL to a device somewhere. And we've decided to go with the division, department, and the asset ID to address every one of our devices. And below is an example payload. And you can see we're collecting the information that we're going to need downstream for processing, like good pieces, defective pieces, work order information, and employee IDs. An earlier model of this, as we iterated through, we thought, hey, why don't we only send the data that has changed? Well, we soon discovered that just receiving a good pieces count for asset 1696 is not going to be enough. Somewhere down the line, we're going to still have to know what work order, what employee it was, and we would either have to go back and forth and query Kepler over HTTP for that information, or go back to some cache and retrieve it. So we decided that it's going to be good practice to send the information, the minimal amount of information that we necessarily need to complete a downstream operation. So here's an example of the JSON payload leaving Kepler over Mqtt. So Mqtt is publishing that payload on the topic for machine 1696, and Mqtt requires a broker. So we chose Apache ActiveMQ. It's open source, and from then on, you have clients that subscribe to the topics they're interested in. In this case, this guy is interested in that exact machine, retrieving data for that exact machine. Where the guy in the bottom, he's interested in receiving data about every machine across Mclain Fogg that are in the forming department. And the client app on those smartphones will do the work and analyze the data and present it in a more informational fashion. What we decided to do instead is push this data to an IoT gateway for further processing and analysis. And we chose for our gateway Microsoft BizTalk. BizTalk is a XML messaging platform. It's able to ingest messages over various protocols and adapters, transform that message, and send it forward to other systems, enterprise systems. Here's a non-exhaustive list of some of the protocols and adapters supported. A lot of these come out of the box. A lot of them you have to pay for. So going through a typical development scenario, what you would do first in BizTalk is set up a receive port. Here we've set up a receive port over the JMS API. So this is going to be information coming from Kepware. Then you choose where world you want this data to end up in. In this instance, we're sending the data to JDE Enterprise System. But we're not limited to only one send port. We can choose various send ports with different transformations to different systems. Then what we do is we grab that Kepware schema and map it over to what JD Edwards expects for a backflush operation that's going to report the number of pieces to JD Edwards against that work order. And then that message travels through a BizTalk orchestration, gets processed, we can apply business rules and logic to it, and get spits out at the end.
Like we said before, the ultimate goal is to get this up to our enterprise system. And so we've traveled the distance from a machine over the wire to Kepware, then to BizTalk, and now we have some decent data. And it's going to, BizTalk is going to talk to our enterprise system, which happens to be JD Edwards. JD Edwards is it's just a standard ERP system. It's like if you've used SAP or Visual Infor or Visual Solutions, some of them say. It's got everything you need built in. It's got the finance, it's got the reporting, it's got the order management and production and mobility management. As a true developer, I'd say that's lacking a little bit there, but there's no JDE people here, so. But that's our enterprise system. It is a full-scale ERP system. Okay, the reason Mclain chose JD Edwards is because it's a very open architecture, which means you can program it. You don't have to take it out of the box and use it. You don't have to have super hire a consulting company with 500 armies of programmers to program it. Guys like normal developers, anyone that's developed in C can handle developing in JD Edwards. So one of the things that we wanted to concentrate on, and Chris showed earlier, was the payload. Okay, the payload really consisted of 5 small pieces of data. Okay, there's no reason to send a whole bunch of stuff to JD Edwards. Now, enterprise systems have a tendency to want a whole bunch of stuff. But we decided, no, we don't want to do it that way. We want to keep the travel across the wire as low and small as possible. So we just used that really small data set, which was basically a work order, an employee, good pieces, bad pieces in the asset set. Okay, so what we did is then, because JD Edwards is an open architecture, we developed a function, just a standard business function that grabs that data, and there's just enough data there that you can go into JD Edwards system, right? Because at this point we're in JD Edwards, and query for all that extra stuff that Edwards needs to do the process. Okay, so what we wound up doing, and what our goal here was backflush, which if you have never heard of the term backflush, essentially in an ERP system, backflushing is just reporting time and materials to a work order. Okay, so we wanted to perform a backflush off that machine. So JD Edwards has interoperability tables, which is for a really fancy name for a table, and we can just stick all the data we need for that backflush operation into that table, then call the actual JDE built-in backflush protocol, and it'll run. Okay, after that function's complete, JD Edwards will give us a message back, say yes, it was successful, or no, it wasn't. And that's basically all we really want Edwards to do. We want JD Edwards to do his job. That message then flows back up to the original custom function that we wrote, in which turn I can send that back to BizTalk. So now at that point, not only did we run the enterprise custom function to report the time and materials, but if there's any issue with that, we've reported all the way back to BizTalk. So now we can message out of BizTalk and send a message in an email, or even all the way back to our operator if we had to.
So we're not going to do any of this in the cloud, but we like clouds. Some of our factories might be in the cloud. So what we want to do with our architecture is we want Kepware. We want an installation of Kepware at every single factory, so that native PLC communication is going to happen at the factory level. But then we're only going to push the data that we're interested in to our data center, to the broker, through BizTalk and to JD Edwards. And we've decided to do this to follow the centralized architecture of our JD Edwards implementation, that it is going to be at the data center, and everything is going to be processed there. So this is kind of going to go through how we started and how you as a company can start too. You know, you kind of have to be practical. You have to start where you know. Our controls engineer is in the back of the room, and we borrowed some hardware from him, like this button. You know, now being in IT, IT has to take a lead on this sometime, and you have to get familiar with the new technologies out there. You have to get familiar with the protocols, and you have to try them out. You know, so in this example, we wired up a button, and then we basically created an HTML page off of the data and displayed it on the iOS app that was $10. What do you do if you're not a Microsoft shop? One of my favorite prototyping platform is ExistDB. It's an open source document store for structured and unstructured data that has the JMS API capability. It has the REST API capabilities. And I like it because I don't have to, whenever I want to change a table or wherever I store my data, I don't have to go back to my DBA and tell them, hey, add me 5 more columns. You know, I can rapidly prototype this stuff. And I think that, you know, through this process, even though it was a 6-month-long process of us doing the research and gathering information, I don't think we did more than a week work. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Planning was the longest part.
We want to keep the person there by this really old machine because we feel that the human element is very important. So I want to open up the forum now to any questions.
You used the BizTalk server, you said, to translate. Was it specifically to support JD Edwards, or you know, what was your reasons for the BizTalk integration?
Yeah, BizTalk has JD Edwards specific adapters, which is actually it's a really good JD Edwards adapters, I'll say too, because what it does is it opens up all the business functions to JD Edwards that are native to JD Edwards. But if you do any custom functions, once you've refreshed into JD Edwards the custom function that you built, it automatically displays over on the BizTalk side. BizTalk automatically picks it up, so it makes it really easy to be able to modify something quickly in JD Edwards and have BizTalk play nicely with it.
Yeah, our JD Edwards CNC, our JD Edwards administrator, brought up that same point. Hey, well, why don't we just use Oracle's IoT platform that's coming out? Well,
Coming out being the specific.
What?
Coming out being
coming out, yeah. So, you know, this is the quicker approach for us to get through it. You know, not to ask for a whole bunch of more money and wait another couple years to where what we've tried to work on is now obsolete and we haven't gotten anywhere again.
First, you already had BizTalk, or you bought it as part of this project?
It's actually part of our Microsoft EA agreement, so we did have it.
Okay, that was the first question. And the second question, just back to the machines that didn't have PLCs or didn't have sensors, how did you, I know you talked about it and I kind of missed it. How did you grab data from them?
Well, we've, there's our controls engineer has recommended a couple different PLCs that we're going to retrofit them with. But for the couple that we have done right now, we have chosen the Arduino-based PLC that can actually count the pieces for such simple operations like counting pieces and then send them over MQTT to the BizTalk server. Yeah. And we do leave that to the operations team for them to determine. You know, we tell them, hey, we need good pieces, bad pieces, and is the machine running or not, and the reason why it's running. And we leave it kind of up to them to do that mechanical fitment. We have been looking at various analytics platforms, but we're not there yet to make a decision. And again, we're not going to invest a bunch of money just because the sales guy takes us out to lunch.
Although
we're gonna do
we
our
are open
research.
for the lunch part, though. In one of the previous places I worked for, we did a lot of work with predictive maintenance. And working with our controls guy, he mentioned on the way down here, as a matter of fact, that that's one of the realms we want to go into, because at the end of the day, you're counting blows, you're counting strokes on a machine, you're counting. Well, really, in essence, that's tool wear, right? You're also counting tool wear. So yeah, that leaves its legs wide open to get into many other things. And one of the things that's kind of near and dear to me is just that predictive maintenance. And I'd like to see us move in that direction in the future.
Yeah, and as much as technology is going to be involved and we can collect data and present it, that doesn't mean that any of that information is going to be acted upon or is going to be actionable. So I think through the lean transformation that Mclain is going through, and I'm going through some of those classes myself, I see the waste that's there. And it's discipline. I know I have a stake in the company. I want to be there. I don't want to lose my job when the next downturn comes about. And more people are beginning to feel the same way.
One more thing I'd like to add to that too is it simply cannot be an IT initiative, any of the stuff. If it's just an IT initiative, it's going to wither on the vine. You've got to have your control guys on board with you. You've got to have maintenance. If you're going down the maintenance road, you got to have your manufacturing supervisors and employees. We like to think our people are the, you always hear the glitch. They're our best assets, but seldom in manufacturing do you see that in practice. If you start working with them, and actually in a lot of cases that's where we got our knowledge is saying, where is this needed? Where is that? Even if it comes down to, I want to put this new gee whiz counter on your machine, do you mount it on the side where the operator's got to walk around to look at it every 5 minutes, or do you mount it right there where he can see it? It makes a difference. And the cool part is if you can get them to be part of it, they begin to own it. And we all know that IT owns way too many things. Just because it's on the wire don't mean IT should own it. Because if the company owns it, if the people own it, they're going to take care of it, and they're going to tell you when there's areas for improvement instead of us just looking for them in the woods. So that's probably the biggest thing is just getting your group together and getting everybody to kind of stroke in the same direction.
Of your stakeholders, the ones you had to convince to release resources to get the job done, to get to where you are now, who are your most skeptical stakeholders in this process?
I would have to say the temporary employees that we have, because they're not really stakeholders.
They didn't care. They
It,
didn't see. They get it. It was hard.
they're right. They could be there one day, and then next day they could be at another job. So their commitment is different. After explaining to them that you can't just look at the bottom line of things, then they're on board. They understand that there's different metrics to start looking at than the old school. Let's just overproduce to make our numbers look good at the end of the month. No, you're talking about convincing them, right?
Yes, convincing them.
They were convinced as soon as the president of our company has gone through lean training and explained to them that this is the way it's going to go, and they have our backing.
So the highest level executive advocate is the one who's really driving the parties to come to the conclusion that you guys probably do.
Yeah, you really got to have executive backing, or else it really becomes hard. I mean, it can be done without it, but it's really super difficult with executive backing. I mean, it's amazing how willing people are to help. But the other thing too is a lot of times you'll get those guys that have worked there for 20 years, 30 years, and this is the way we always did it. Why would we change? But the thing is I like to make those guys part of the solution. I like to say, well, why does, what would you do? What's your opinion? And a lot of times they got some really good ideas. And the key being always, even if you're not going to take their idea, as long as you get back to them and say, hey, that was a great idea, but it tends to go pretty far. They actually respect that versus just never talking to them again. And they always wonder, well, gee, I had a great idea and they blew me off.
So a good example of some of that stakeholder commitment and they showing that they do care. Before when we lacked resources on the control side, and maybe things fell between the cracks. Some of our machines that count parts at the end of all the processes, they had a sensor that when the box moves, it would trigger to print a label. Well, some of these new machines that we got were never hooked up that way. So what the team lead in that department did is he rigged a mouse so that when the box moved across the mouse, it clicked the button and printed a label. And that worked. And I got wind of that. He came up to me one day and said, hey, I need a mouse. I'm like, okay, why? Oh, it's for the sorting machine. I'm like, oh, okay, all right.
It's amazing how innovative they can be. And if we could have hired a contractor to do that for a mere $5,000. And before he gets to talk, I'm going to let everyone know that's our controls expert.
I was going to say I'm the controls engineer. One thing, just to touch on the last question, I think what has been implemented at McLean Fogg has gone over a lot easier because everybody in the organization understands through the lean training, through the mentality in the company, where the waste is, or at least that the waste exists. And there's been a lot of failed data acquisition programs that have taken place in the past with no buy-in. Now, you've only got to point out to some people, and because they are attuned to the fact that there's waste and that we can get rid of it and it's to the betterment of the company, then they'll take on board a lot of these ideas a lot quicker and a lot easier. So what I'm trying to say very badly is that if you start with the education, it's a lot easier to sell the product at the end of the day, this being the product. We've educated our employees, we've educated all of the people in the company, and it's easy to get backing, it's easy to get money. We had a conversation earlier on with Capware, and now all we've got to do is put a bright, shiny object down, and somebody will pick it up. One of the executives will pick it up, and they'll want to go with it. They'll want to give us some money to make it work. In the past, that was not the case.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to listen to us.
Thank you.